Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Extension and Activities in Large Cities. India's urbanization is followed by certain inherent problems such as housing, transport, infrastructure, water supply and sanitation, pollution and inadequate social infrastructure, thus leading to environmental degradation and affecting quality of life. Land is the greatest natural gift bestowed on human beings. All human activities, whether social, political or economic, revolve around the enjoyment of land and benefits related to land. The supply of land is limited, while its demand is constantly rising and competing over the years. All endeavors of the government in infusing growth and development into the economy are closely related to land utilization for rural and urban activities. Any attempt to make land available for various activities is bound to have repercussions on problems of land acquisition, development and distribution. Rapid urbanization has not only overburdened the existing urban infrastructure, but also inflated land prices in urban areas. The continuous and excessive rise in land values in and around the urban centers poses serious problems for development planning. Reliable data on land prices are extremely difficult to come by. Prices of land recorded at the registration offices are neither properly quoted nor they are published. One has to rely on the scanty, scattered information lying herein. There, a market is a mechanism that regulates trade and a site where buyers and sellers exchange goods, services or information. It consists of a framework of institutions, social practices, relationships, regulations and actors, all of whom participate, in one way or another, in the production and exchange process. A market thus brings together buyers and sellers to exchange goods for money. The prices of these goods are set according to the forces of supply and demand. After studying the unit on urban land market, you shall be able to discuss about land, access to land and urban land policy. Explain various factors relating to land markets and land price. Describe the problems associated with urban land markets. Narrate the characteristics and classification of urban land markets. 3.2 Urban land, concept and related legal aspects. Land is a state subject, as per the scheme of distribution of legislative powers. Under the Indian Constitution, only the state legislatures can make laws in respect of the lands. However, if the state legislatures accord their concurrence, the central government may also enact on such subject as in the case of urban land. Ceiling. Urban land is an area which is characterized by concentration of population and various other uses for different activities. Urban areas are termed as cities, towns or conurbations. Urban land is defined under the Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act, ULCRA, 1976 as 1. Any land situated within the limits of an urban agglomeration, U.A., and forming part of master plan, if prepared. 2. If there is no master plan, any land within the limits of UA and situated within the local limits of municipal corporation, municipality, notified, town, area committee and cantonment board area. However, urban land does not include any land within the limits of a UA if I. It is used for the purpose of agriculture and horticulture. E. The land is entered in the revenue land records as used for the purpose of agriculture and not for any other purpose. 3.2.2 Land assembly, development and disposal. There have been, by and large, two approaches to managing new urban growth in India. In the first approach, the planning authorities and development agencies acquire large portions of land and use this land in a desirable and appropriate manner, according to a plan. This is referred as the land acquisition method of land assembly. In the second approach, instead of acquiring the land, it brings together or pool together a group of landowners and replan the area by readjusting or reshaping every land parcel in a manner so that it is given a regular shape and access and in urban land market. The process, a portion of land parcel is appropriated to provide for roads, infrastructure, and public amenities. This is referred to as the land readjustment and pooling method of land assembly. The approaches are briefly explained as Land assembly. In this method, the public planning authorities, development Agencies acquire large areas of land from agricultural landholders, farmers. Under the Land Acquisition Act of 1894, compensation paid to farmers is based on prevailing land prices or as notified by the government. To minimize opposition to acquisition, farmers are paid prices higher than agricultural land prices. Master plan of the area is prepared, laying out the roads, plots for social amenities, and plots for sale. Roads and infrastructure are then built using government funds or loans. Developed plots are then sold for planned uses at market rates or predetermined price, which are most often much higher than the rates at which land is acquired. This land assembly method can be broadly categorized into two types of practices. A. Land pooling, readjustment scheme, town planning schemes. TPS, the concept of land readjustment is to assemble small land parcels into a large land parcel, provide it with infrastructure in a planned manner and return the reconstituted land to the owners, after deducting the cost of the provision of infrastructure and public spaces by the sale of some of serviced land. A land readjustment scheme is typically initiated by the municipal or the government designating an area which is about to be converted from agricultural to urban land use. A subdivision plan is developed for a unified planning of the area. Provision of infrastructure and services is financed by the sale of some of the plots within the area, often for commercial activities. The original landowners are provided plots within the reshaped area which, although smaller in size, now have access to infrastructure and services. B. Guided land development, GLD. Guided land development is a land management technique for guiding the conversion of privately owned land from rural to urban uses. It uses the provision of infrastructure as a mechanism to guide urban development. It is done in partnership with landowners who pay for the cost of servicing their land through donation of land for public infrastructure and payment of a betterment levy. The principle behind guided land development is that the government agency entrusted with urban planning or land development proactively selects the direction where it feels urban development should take place and provides infrastructure in those areas. This encourages private land developers to develop land in that area. By not building infrastructure in other areas, it acts as a disincentive for private development in those areas. E. Tools for land development. Land is developed according to master plan. Zonal plans proposals by providing physical and social infrastructure based on planning norms, standards. Various schemes related infrastructure such as water, sewage, drainage, power, solid waste management under physical infrastructure and health, education and others under social infrastructure are implemented as part of urban development for projects namely housing, industries, special projects like port development, SEZ, special economic zones, individual townships and industrial townships. Some of the important tools in the land development are as follows. A. Planning. The commonly used planning tools are general development plan, master plans, development plans, strategic plans, structure plans, action plans, local area plans and others. The broad objective of these plans is to guide the development of the city for a specified time period and to promote the land use pattern which most efficiently fulfills the objectives of the planned growth. B. Master plan. Master plan provides a broad framework for local decision making and it involves public participation in making such a plan. C. Zoning. The master plan, development plan use different forms of zoning and regulations. Zoning dictates to the landowner the use of land for and what activity, use premise is permissible on that land such as residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural or other land uses. It is an effective tool to control densities and protect the natural and living environments. D. Subdivision regulations. Land subdivision and building regulations are used to plan at the micro level. The regulations define standards for layout and lot sizes, street improvement and procedures for assigning land for public purposes. Subdivisions provide the essential characteristics of land uses, street patterns and public utilities, facilities. A. Building regulations. Building regulations are another means of regulating use of land for urban activities. Their main objective is to Secure socially accepted minimum standards. These are concerned with safety such as fire protection, structural safety and sanitary conditions. F. Land disposal. Land is generally disposed by the government through Government's Grant Act, 1958, on leasehold basis, with no profit no loss. Subsidized rates, auction rates, tendering to highest bidder and at market price. 3.2.3 Urban Land Policy. Central government formulated the Urban Land Policy for Delhi. This policy contains directions on assembly, development and disposal of lands through the following legislations for bulk acquisition of Land Acquisition Act, 1894. For Land Development Delhi Development Act, 1957, MPD, ZDP, and for Disposal of Land Government's Grant Act, 1958, leasehold basis. Most countries put restrictions on the use of land in both freehold and leasehold holdings. Once individuals or corporate entities acquire either land or land use rights, they acquire tenure. This tenure can either be sold or leased by the owner. Therefore, tenure is divided into two categories, I. Leasehold and E. Freehold. Leases can vary from 30 years to 99 years or in perpetuity. The longer the term of lease, the more it resembles freehold. Most leases place restrictions on the leaseholder. For example, a leaseholder may be allowed to construct a building over the land but may have no rights to the minerals in the land. Freehold has very few restrictions on it and is considered to be more secure. Leasehold is considered more equitable as it reserves the right of ownership of land to the society as a whole rather than to an individual. However, restrictions are put on the use of both freehold and leasehold in the better interest of society. 3.3 Land Market, Concept and Types. A market is a site where buyers and sellers exchange goods, services or information. It brings together buyers and sellers to exchange goods for money. The prices of these goods are set according to the forces of supply and demand. In an economy, land is regarded as one of the three basic factors of production. Together with labor and capital. Land is a special component because unlike labor and capital, it is finite. Land and land use rights have always been used as a commodity to be bought and sold in capitalist systems. Land tenure. Characteristics of efficient land market and land speculations are important. Features of land. Urban land market is shaped by state regulations, policies, norms and principles of supply and demand. These factors are enforced by a variety of bodies, including the state, consumer rights organizations, international trade organizations, and localized community or social organizations. Depending on the sophistication of the market, the number of these components and their relationships can vary considerably. The key to an efficient land market is the easy and ready availability of developed land, which does not mean less regulation. Constraints to efficient land markets are often more political than technical. Efficient and equitable land markets are a prerequisite for well-functioning cities. However, most cities in developing countries suffer from land market distortions caused by poor land development and management policies, which include poor planning, slow provision of infrastructure and services, poor land information systems, cumbersome and slow land transaction procedures, as well as under-regulation of private land development, leading to unplanned or ribbon corridor development of land in the urban periphery. 3.3. 1. Formal and informal land market. In Indian cities, the coexistence of formal and informal land markets is quite apparent. While they follow different rules, regulations and processes, they also share similarities, actors and logic. Defining formal and informal markets is difficult, as they are often interrelated. Formal land markets are those whose transactions are legally recognized and are officially registered in the government's systems. Informal land markets include a variety of urban land transactions, exchanges, and transfers that are not recognized by the state as legal, but are socially accepted as legitimate by a variety of urban actors. Typically, private or government land types are also traded in the informal land market. Informal land market transactions are not recognized by law and are not officially registered in the government systems. Like the formal urban land market, informal markets consist of a variety of Institutions which support, facilitate, regulate and arbitrate informal land transactions. These include state officials, such as local government councillors, traditional leaders, chiefs, community leaders, and community and family networks. Like formal markets, these regulatory bodies can be effective in facilitating exchange or can be overly restrictive and make it more difficult for some poor people to access land. Within the informal land market, there are varying degrees to which land is commodified. The degree of commodification has a significant impact on how the price of land is determined. The informal land market has a large number of socially dominated land market transactions, where the supply and demand of land are mediated more by social relationships than by a financial logic. The sale of peri-urban land in the informal market is fast becoming a thriving trade, where sellers are able to fetch market-related prices as demand for urban land increases. As a result of urbanization, more and more customary land is traded through this market. The increasing demand for urban land has resulted in its commodification in areas that have historically had communal tenure. Despite this, the informal market is generally considered a risky investment because the transactions are illegal. Informal landowners are not typically registered by governments as the legal owners of the land. This tends to discourage investment in land because of fear of losing their land and property. Moreover, without a centralized and reliable system for registering land and owners' rights, urban land transactions are vulnerable to illegal sales, such as the sale of one piece of land to more than one buyer. These problems increase the risk that potential buyers have to take, discouraging investment in land and dampening activity in the urban land market. To overcome these problems, the informal sector is developing systematic mechanisms of recognizing tenure and rights. These methods adopt formal processes, such as the issuance of agreements and certificates that have been witnessed by recognized leaders in the community. While these forms of registration may not be legally recognized, they are considered socially legitimate by the actors involved, and in some cases help to reduce land fraud. Both the formal and informal urban land markets are an integral part of urban land dynamics. 3.4 Classification of land and land market. 3.4.1 Classification of lands. Every piece of land under the pressure of urban growth has its peculiar characteristics, hence can form a class in itself. However, considering the major characteristics including the physical attributes of the land and the attitudinal attributes of the owner, the lands can be classified into 4 categories. 1. Farmlands or vacant lots with no infrastructure and urban facility except perhaps an approach road. These lands may be located just outside the city municipal limits. 2. Farmlands and unused lots with basic infrastructure such as roads to the site, drainage, electricity etc., and suitable for building purposes and located outside the administrative boundary of the city. 3. Buildable lands recently developed with or without buildings and with all urban infrastructure and facilities and located within the city boundary. 4. More than 10 years old developed, buildable lands and buildings including those in the old parts of the city with very high land value but with the preponderance of old buildings of deteriorating quality. Further subcategorization of the above 4 types of lands are possible depending upon the site conditions, the intensity and type of the existing use, legality of tenure and whether the land is owned by the government or privately. The latter 2 conditions especially determine the translatability of the land to a great extent. In the case of the lands where the tenure of the present user is illegal, the market transactions are not normal, as is the case with the squatter settlements or even when the tenureship of the occupant is under legal dispute. Transactions, however, do take place but often with a depressed price. Eviction of the illegal occupants or fighting the legal dispute to establish tenureship becomes one of the conditions of the sale deal. The following briefly states the conditions which affect the market transactions of each of the 4 categories of land listed above. Category 1, the lands which occur outside the urban limits with good access to the city, become the most potential lands for urban growth, and hence, for market transaction. Industries which are not permitted within the city for environmental, Reasons: housing and tertiary activities find easy access to lands. These lands are also not often subject to municipal land subdivision regulations, building codes, and taxes, and therefore are more amenable to urban growth and easy market transactions. Market transactions of these types of lands are dominated by a large number of sellers and buyers. Land parcels of various type and varying locations are transacted because of the involvement of a large number of sellers and buyers. In the initial stages, there is a lot of articulation regarding what the land price should be, and a notion about the land price prevails. The price paid for the recent transactions in the locality usually becomes the guide. Normally, the land transactions are officially registered, and the initial condition of virtually no infrastructure keeps the land lot price low and thereby facilitates the access of the poor and low-income households. Category 2. The lands of this category occur in small pockets and are usually located along the main access routes to the city or in small patches in townships, which are developed close to the city limits. The transaction of these land lots is normally controlled by medium-sized developers, and their operations are more articulated and commercial than those for the lands of the first category. However, the land price in these markets is 30 to 40% lower than that for the similar types of land within the city. Relatively low land price and the legality of tenure are the main attractions which influence the transactions. The demand for such lands is mostly from low-middle income workers who prefer commuting over 1 hour to 1.5 hour travel time to staying in small rented dwellings near the workplace in the city. Category 3. These lands are the prime lands of the city, and invariably most of the lots are built upon these lands. Therefore, the land and housing markets operate at the same time in these areas. The lands and dwellings which carry ownership tenure are of a significantly higher price than those subject to public leasehold tenure. Market transactions of these leasehold lands and dwellings are usually restricted, as in the case of Delhi. However, market transactions of these lands do take place, often circumventing the restrictions. Very conservative estimates of the Delhi Development Authority in 1989 show that more than 50% of the publicly leased lands have changed ownership for practical purposes, though on the official papers, the original ownership continues. It is, however, generally believed that this proportion is higher. Extensive transactions of the leasehold properties in Delhi show the great market demand and the ineffectiveness of the restrictions put by the authorities. Category 4. These lands, occurring in the central and old built-up parts of the city, include aged housing areas, vacated industrial sites, port and dockyards, aged public buildings with uneconomical uses, abandoned railway yards, etc. High to very high land prices of these lands reflect the high prices the commercial users can afford to pay. High-rise development reflects the intensity of use of space for these centrally located lands, and the quality of redevelopment determines the potential value of these lands. In traditional parts of the cities, these lands often consist of traditional housing, which are high-density but low-rise developments with many old and dilapidated structures. The ownership titles of these lands are often complicated. Therefore, the market operations are difficult and are strongly influenced by the social preferences of the community. Free transactions are also often restricted. Implementation of renewal projects is hindered due to the involvement of a large number of small landowners. Some generalizations can be made from the above different categories of lands. Amongst the on-site factors, besides location, site conditions, size of the lot, availability of infrastructure, accessibility, the tenure status, and whether or not the particular lot of land is subject to land subdivision and building regulations by the city authority, also become important factors which determine the land price and the conditions for the market transactions. The demand and supply position of land prevailing at the city level, however, determines the base or the national price for all lands, more specifically for the lands in the formal market. 3. 4.2 Classification of land market. In almost all transactions of land, any kind of sale has to be officially registered with the government, as per the law, and also, both the buyer and the seller have To pay the required taxes for transfer of the tenure rights. Therefore, official recognition to the transaction brings legality. In theory, the norms followed in these transactions should conform to the accepted commercial norms. However, it is observed that a large number of such transactions do not follow normal commercial norms, especially those related to mode of payment, deferred payment, uniformity in conditions for all buyers, etc. Often these norms keep varying at the will of the private sellers, and even in case of some public land sellers, the accepted commercial norms are not followed. Broadly, the land markets can be classified into three. 1. Those dealing with private lands. 2. Those dealing with public lands. 3. Those dealing with lands whose transactions are not recognized by the government. In actual operation of the markets, these three classes function distinctly different, though brokers or middlemen may operate for one or more such markets. The market operations and the procedures followed in each type of market depend on the type of operations involved in the deal. The operators can be classified normally as sellers, buyers, brokers, and financial institutions. The sellers, who play the dominant role in land markets, which are usually sellers' markets, can perhaps be classified as follows. Table 1. Conditions for operations and types of land. 1. Public owner. A. Operations are controlled and effectuated by the public agency. B. Operations are controlled by the public agency but actually effectuated by officially recognized brokers who operate with commission on the sale proceeds. C. Operations effectuated by not officially recognized brokers who, through their personal level contact with the public officials, facilitate the transactions outside the rule and give advantage to the buyer. Though the operation is illegal, it is rarely detected. The broker gets commission from the buyer in case of first sale deals, and from both the buyer and the seller in case of subsequent sale of lands and properties which have public restrictions for free sale. All types of developed land within the city. 2. Private owner. I. Lands within city limits. A. Operation by the owner. 1. Direct deal between the owner and the buyer. 2. Operation by the owner through the broker. 3. Operation by owner through land developer or real estate builder. 4. Operation by owner associations, lands with government restrictions on use in construction. B. Operation by the real estate developer owner. A. Real estate owner as the selling agent. B. Real estate owner selling through broker. 2. Farm, non-farm lands with no or minimal outside city limits government restrictions. A. Rural landowner directly selling to buyer. B. Rural landowner and the real estate developer jointly selling to the buyer. C. Owner associations dealing with the buyer. D. Real estate developer owner selling to the buyers land with no or minimal governmental intervention. 3. Speculators. A. Private owners with exclusive speculation motive. B. Public owners who transact land with implicit or explicit motive for speculation, all types of land. 4. Land grabbers. A. Influential leaders of gangs who forcibly squat and occupy lands illegally, lands which are prone to squatting, especially public lands lying unused for long periods, and lands along railways or highways near city. As may be seen from the above listing, a fairly large number of operators function in the land markets, and often in combination, depending upon what type of land they are dealing with. But where land markets are more developed, better organized, and are supported by efficient information systems and development controls, the operators are relatively less in number, and so are the variations in operational conditions of the markets, based on the commercial nature of the transactions and the eligibility for official recognition. The three broad categories of land markets can be further classified as follows. Table 2. Table 2. Formal and informal land types. Commercial. I. Public, private sale of land for industrial, commercial, residential and other urban uses. Public, private rental or hire purchase of land for all type of urban uses. E. Government purchase of land for all types of urban uses. I. Illegal sale of land. Officially not approved for subdivision or sale, rental of properties. E. Public, privata. Rental or built on land which is not officially approved for subdivision. E. Sale of subdivided rural land for all types of urban land. In urban fringe, non-commercial. I. Public lease of lands for all types of urban uses. Public supply of developed lands at subsidized rates, especially for residential use. Public regularization of the erstwhile. E. Unauthorized developments. Lands obtained through gifts and inheritance. Sale, rental of lands in squatter settlements located on lands owned by the government. Sale, rental of lands in transient or makeshift squatter settlements near large construction sites. The informal land markets not only account for vast majority of all land transactions in each metro city but also, more importantly, those provide the most efficient means by which the low-income and the poor households have access to land and/or home and consequently consolidate their positions in the urban economy. The informal land markets are subject to abuse and manipulations by interest groups, and the resultant development is often of rather poor physical quality, with limited possibilities for improvement. In spite of this shortcoming, however, the informal land markets significantly contribute to urban growth by catering to the needs of the majority of the urban population, which is economically advantaged. 3.5 Characteristics of urban land markets. Once land is traded as a commodity, a land market is considered to exist. A well-functioning land market could be defined as one whose system of governing the land market is a. efficient, i.e. encourages quick development and transaction of land, b. equitable, i.e. provides reasonable access to all income groups, c. environmentally sound, i.e. protects its sustainable use for the good of both current and future users, and d. compatible, integrated with other laws and regulations governing land, such as planning, taxation and provision of public infrastructure and services. A poorly functioning land market leads to several ills, including land speculation, creation of slums and squatter settlements, environmental deterioration, and an inefficient urban development pattern which increases the cost of doing business in the city and adversely affects the urban economy. Land is profitable asset. Since land is valuable, it is a profitable asset for the owner. To own land, a real estate property provides lifetime satisfaction to most people, and it is often seen that through acquisition of land or space people consolidate themselves in the urban economy. Land ownership provides societal status in many societies, and moreover land is an important vehicle of transfer of wealth through inheritance. For all these reasons, to own land or a real estate property is not only an economic necessity but a psychosocial necessity as well for many. Besides the owner's personal preferences, the market forces and the societal needs also influence the land. While a landowner may like to keep his land vacant or underutilized for personal reasons or even for speculative purposes, it may not be desirable considering the market efficiency and the societal needs. Thus, there is often a clash of interests, that of the owner, the market and the government. Theoretically, market value of a piece of land is determined by factors such as location, site conditions and the use potential. The value of the land, in turn, dictates its most potential use in. There is a close economic relationship between the value and the use the land should have. If the land is not put to its potential use, the urban economy suffers, and thereby, one may say, the society suffers. Assigning appropriate use to a piece of land commensurate with its value is a critical input because such a decision involves great financial stakes, and once a use is put on the land, it is not easily reversed. This is one of the major reasons which explains the existence of large pockets of land, owned by private and public agencies as well, which continue with the original uneconomic uses even in rapidly growing cities. Urban land market operation. The land market operation in any society portrays the interplay of a number of interest groups. The forces which govern the market transactions and the use of urban lands always heighten the conflict between efficiency and equity. The latter requires socialization of the ownership and wider distribution of the tenure, but, invariably, at the cost of efficiency in use. On the other side, uncontrolled free market ownership is seen to promote high efficiency in the use of individual parcels of land. But, again, invariably at the cost of the societal and community interests. Hence, the classical struggle for all public authorities is to evolve means by which the efficiency and equity issues are optimally balanced within a given socio-political situation. It is in this very context of efficiency and equity concepts that the characteristics and peculiarities of the land markets are discussed in this paper. 3.6 Segment of urban land market. The various segments of urban land market are discussed below. Space segment. Different types of urban dwellers demand different kinds of urban space. For instance, a commercial business will demand space in an area where there are high volumes of people passing through, while this may not be an important criterion for a household seeking residential space. For new immigrants in a city, affordable housing may be an important criterion, and they may therefore be drawn to slums or peri-urban areas where housing is cheap. Similarly, space to trade in the informal sector is a significant criterion for the majority of urban dwellers in Indian cities. For these urban actors, informal markets, city streets and even residential homes become important spaces for economic activity. The supply of new space to the urban market is a function of the property values, building costs, land availability, and expected returns that investors and developers are able to secure. Capital segment, for the land and property market to function effectively. Equity, debt financing or other types of funding must be available in the capital segment of the market. For example, in the residential sector, the need for an accessibility of land or housing can only be translated into effective demand if mortgage finance or microfinance is available to serve both higher income and lower end clients. Where the commercial sector is concerned, the capital segment influences how property values are determined, as commercial sector clients mainly acquire these properties for their income generating potential. They are therefore valued and finances are made available for their acquisition in terms of their potential yield. Development segment. Actors in the development segment carefully consider supply and demand conditions in the space market, as well as the property values derived from the capital segment of the market. Thus, where the future supply will be located in the space segment, what type of development will occur and who will undertake such developments is decided. Within the development segment of the land market, land segment, development activity translates into a demand for land in the land segment. Land segment is the manifestation of the nature of demand. In the space segment, the availability of debt financing in the capital segment, and the development decisions made in the development segment. The supply of land in the land segment can be divided into land that has already been zoned for development and land that has not been brought into the market yet. 3.7 Problems with regard to land markets. The urban land market is facing a lot of problems, and different problems associated with the urban land market are imperfect substitutability of land. The most important source of imperfection is the lack of substitutability. No two pieces of land are the same. Even between two adjacent pieces of land, there can be differences in terms of size, shape, access, soil quality, etc. In other words, each parcel of land has some unique characteristics, which reduce its substitutability and give the landowner some degree of monopoly power. Private value vs. market value. The lack of perfect substitutability also means that there could be a private value associated with a given piece or parcel of land, which is different from its market value. The private value is determined by the landowner's expectations of future economic benefits from that land or its opportunity costs. Land value is dependent on use path. The economic value of any given piece of land is contingent on the developments in the area surrounding the land. If an area, for example, gets urbanized, then economic activities in the area increases and in the process land values also increase. At any given point of time, the price of a given piece of land reflects the probability of alternative activities taking place in that area that can potentially alter its use. This is the reason why land prices change due to development of infrastructure in an area, i.e., holdout problem. One of the important problems recognized with regard to the functioning of land markets, especially in urban areas, is the holdout problem. This occurs when a large piece of contiguous land is required for a certain use, which involves the acquisition of land from a large number of landholders, some of whom may be unwilling to sell, that is, holdout. 3.8 Urban land price. The spatial concentration of economic activities creates the value of urban land. Market value of a piece of land is determined by factors such as location, site conditions and the use potentials. The value of the land, in turn, dictates its most potential use and close economic relationship between the value and the land use. If the land is not put to its potential use, the urban economy suffers and thereby, the society suffers. Most urban economic activities do not require land per se but mainly the permissible total built-up, floor, space on it. The spatial concentration of floor space where various activities are taking place allows the increasing returns. The terms price, cost and value are often used interchangeably but have different meanings in economics. Understanding these concepts is especially useful in India, where a history of customary and neo-customary practices means that land is often not treated purely as a commodity that can be bought or sold on the open market. When a clan or family is allocated land by a traditional leader, they will typically offer him a gift. But this cannot be equated to the price of the land or its market value because it is not intended as payment and is often much less than the price one would pay in the market. They may, however, pay in other ways, through loyalty, through political support or through taxes over time. The concept of open market value has a specific and universally accepted definition. The International Valuation Standards Committee defines it as the estimated amount for which a property should exchange on the date of valuation between a willing buyer and a willing seller in an arm's length transaction after proper marketing wherein the parties had each acted knowledgeably, prudently, and without compulsion. Each one of these elements is essential in the determination of the open market value. When dealing with land, market value is not the only form of value that exists. Indeed, land markets illustrate just how many different types of value there are, and provide good examples of non-monetary, non-market ways of deriving value. Because land is a resource that has social, cultural and political value to which a material value cannot always be attached, the value of land is also subjective, based on emotions, personal preferences and beliefs. Property is particularly prone to the impact of externalities because it is fixed in space. A landowner or tenant cannot move their land if a neighbor opens a noisy bar or brothel next door or because the city decides to build a highway over their house. However, a landowner may incur positive externalities from being located close to public transport, schools, employment or other social amenities. The time, effort and money spent accessing land, for example, getting to meetings and negotiating with the owners, securing and registering the land with the deeds office and obtaining building permits from local government offices are transaction costs that must be paid along with the land's market value. 3.8.1 Aspects, factors influencing land price. Land price varies depending on the following factors: location, near to highway, railways, CBD etc., size of the urban development, metro, type 1, 2, 3 and IV. Cities, towns, economic activities, industrial, commercial, trading, administration. Tourism, religious, urban land policy, urban development policy, high-rise, low-rise governance and institutional frame of urban settlements, development. Control regulations, FAR, ground coverage, bylaws, building height, parking norms, and applicable. Therefore, in brief, the land price depends on the size of the city, importance of location, and development controls applicable. Further, in a planned development area, the land prices are majorly dependent on Two factors, i.e. provision of quality of infrastructure based on planning norms, which includes transport, water, sewerage, drainage, power supply and education, health, recreation and socio-cultural facilities, and applicable development control. Regulations to be applied by public and private agencies at layout and building level within the framework of development policies contained in the master plan, which include provisions for the use of premises, property and limitations upon shape, size and type of buildings that are constructed or occupy the land. These provide regulations for both horizontal as well as vertical use of land. 3.9 Summary. Land is the greatest natural gift bestowed on human beings. All human activities, whether social, political or economic, revolve around the enjoyment of land and benefits related to land. Supply of land is limited. Its demand is rising and competing over the years. All endeavors of the government in infusing growth and development into the economy are closely related to land utilization for rural and urban activities. Any attempt to make land available for various activities is bound to have repercussions and problems of land acquisition, development, and distribution. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.